Hello? You seek the Oracle. Who are you? I am Seraph. I can take you to her. But first, I must apologize. Apologize for what? For this.
Warning. 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 Your brain is about to engage. Open your ears, close your mouth, and open your mind. Ladies and gentlemen, Vyzygoth's Grassy Knoll.
Well, if I asked, folks, you're listening to this on July 4th, and with us is somebody I'm sure you're very familiar with, and if you aren't, boy, you got something in store for you. And once again, revisiting the Grassy Knoll is the Informer. Man, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
I thank you for joining me, and also at such a late time, but nevertheless, thanks for coming back. I think it's apropos, considering what we're celebrating or not celebrating on Wednesday, July 4th.
Right.
Dependence Day, right. Before we go into what you've found, a new ground you've broken, can you give us just a thumbnail, which you went into in some depth in the shows that we did, about the original, I guess, canard, I mean, the real big fairy tale about the United States and the Constitution. Can you hit the high points for us?
Yeah, basically, as you know, a lot of people through the years have claimed that we have to have a republic and so on and so forth, simply because when the people came out of the convention and Ben Franklin was asked the question, what have you wrought us? And he says, a republic if you can keep it. Well, from that point on, it seems like everybody picked up on republic and says, well, it can't be a democracy and it's got to be a republic and yada, yada, yada. But little do they know that if they've researched the word that the Founding Fathers used, and remember, they were good English grammar people and very educated, where the average person wasn't. In fact, they were dumber, but not as dumb as the people are today. But if you would pull up in Black's Law, 4th edition, the definition of republic is a commonwealth. And then it goes on and it talks about the state and and the citizens. Well, okay. The key in understanding any dictionary is to look at the words that, like it says republic, and then right after it, it says a commonwealth. Okay. Now you know that a commonwealth is defining a republic. So now you've got to go and you've got to find out what is a commonwealth. Okay? That's easy enough. You just go look up commonwealth, and in the commonwealth it says a public or common weal or welfare. This cannot be regarded as a technical term of public law, though it's used in the political science. It generally designates, when so employed, a republican frame of government. Okay, so now you know that you're talking about a commonwealth and a republican. And, you know, it says, in the latter sense, the official title of several of the United States, as Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Virginia, and Kentucky, would be appropriate to them and all to be called a commonwealth, which it is when you look at, like, Pennsylvania is called a commonwealth and so on and so forth. It then says sometimes it may denote the corporate entity or the government of a jural society or state possessing powers, and then you say, okay, well, let's see how they are using it, and it says a corporate entity or of a jural society, and now you have to go and look up a jural society. So, you know, it just keeps building and building until you get what they're actually talking about when he said a republic. And a jural society, it says the sphere, jural sphere, is to be distinguished from the moral sphere, and the jural society is used as a synonym of state or organized political community. All right, so now you know you've got an organized political community, and they refer to the state quite often. So you just say, oh, well, let me go see what state says. And in the state, they have a lot of things under state. One of the component commonwealths or states of the United States of America. Its term is also applied to governmental agencies. The people of the state in their collective capacity is considered as a party wronged in a criminal deed. All right. Well, everybody says, okay, I am the state. I'm part of the state, and therefore I'm sovereign. No, wrong. The state is sovereign. You're just the political leftovers. And when you go into the particular part of, I'm trying to think of the name of it now. It is, it comes out of a law journal, and everybody can pick up on it under person in the ATG Press. So, okay, so now you're saying the people. And in there it says, identity. In the United States, the people were brought on stage as an acting political entity. Well, it compares to what Blacks is saying. Acting through representatives. And it says that in free states, the people form an artificial person or body politic, the highest and noblest that can be known. That's out of Wilson's works.
Okay.
By the people of the state is meant that all members. Well, now if you're a member, and they cite it as Penhollow versus Stone, which is an admiralty case. Admiralty deals with corporations. It deals with commercial entities.
Enterprise, right. Mm-hmm.
So it says, further on, the people as a corporate unit form an artificial person or body politic, thus constituted they form the moral person. Well, wait a minute, back in here it says it is not moral, it is political. So it says there is no distinction between the people and the state. And therefore, when you are listed as we the people, you then are a body politic, a corporate unity. That's why, of course, they come after you and have commercial crimes under the Internal Revenue Service Code of just about anything you can think of. Kidnapping is a commercial crime. And therefore, then, it says that there are so many people, the sovereignty resides in the great body of people, not in the distinct individuals, but in their political capacity only. All right, now we're right back to Blacks, where it says it is not moral, it's political. All right, so they are very confusing, and you've got to be able to nail this down with enough information and have enough cognitive, so you don't have any
get beyond it, yeah.
That you've got to have a real good train of thought and understanding of what they're actually talking about, and you won't unless you go into Black's Law Dictionary. Forget about standard dictionaries because we're talking about law.
Okay. So you hang everything, and rightfully so, I would assume, on Blacks.
Well, Blacks and Ballantines and
right.
All the stuff that comes off of like Duke and LaSalle and Yale and all those. And they even tell you that the individual contracts the state at his own peril. And it says, it is now well settled there is no judicial remedy in favor of the individual against a state to compel the performance of a contract, though it's settled the state can pass no law impairing the obligation of a contract once made.
Can I stop you to ask you a bunch of questions that I've already come up with?
Yeah.
And if you can remember where you left off to get back to where you're going.
Okay.
We throw the word around the state quite often. It does refer to the states that we live in. We think about the state also, and I think it can be interpreted as being the federal government. And that might be a misconception. However, let me ask you this. One, the title state, is that a play off a state?
Yeah, that is off of the estate, and the estate happened to be all of this country under the crown because the crown owned the estate. And then what they did is they shortened it and made it state. So here's the problem. Here's the key. You have a geographical state, and you have a political state. Now, remember, back in 1791, when Washington brought in the banks, he had to have control over the banks so that the geographical states would not go in and impose their wills like they tried in McCulloch versus Maryland when Maryland sued the banks. And they had to control them. So Washington created an overlay over top of the physical area called, say, New York.
Okay.
And made it the state of New York.
What's the difference between the geographical New York and the state of New York?
It's a fiction.
The state of New York is a fiction?
Yes.
Okay.
And like the state of Florida or this state, whenever you say the term this state, that means that it is the artificial, fictional entity only existing in people's mind. And it amazes me that when you ride around the country and you go through certain towns and everything, you'll see this town incorporated 1807. This town incorporated 1800 and whatever. There means that you are dealing with a corporation. You are living in a corporation, and when you go to vote and register, you're saying, here I am, I want to be a member of the body politic in which I now reside in your fictional state, and I am no longer the physical being called a man. I am a person, an artificial entity.
Are the ways that you rope yourself in to being involved in this is through what? The getting of the obtaining of a driver's license, voting and such. Is that correct?
Well, a lot of that, it's kind of complicated, but
it is.
Yeah, basically, you can be a physical man and not have any ties in voting or nothing like that, and you don't claim that you have a representative in Congress and yada yada. But now, when you go down and register your car, you got to have insurance before they'll register your car. So you go to the insurance company, and right there is Admiralty. That's commerce. You say, I need to register my car, but they won't register it unless I get insurance. Okay, well, what do you got? I got a 1980 Oldsmobile and da-da-da, and serial number and all this. So they issue and give you insurance. You go down to the motor vehicle and say, here, I got insurance on the car. Right there is when you prove that you are now leaving the physical state of being a man and becoming a person to which all statutes are written under persons. You never see a statute for man and woman, although they trick the people into believing that, oh, well, person means either gender. No, wrong. The Lord didn't create persons. The Lord created man and woman. He didn't create a fiction.
Right.
And if a lot of people go read the word person, in law, the word man does not exist, but person does exist, and it is not the physical man, the physical being.
So person refers to a fictional
artificial
creature.
Entity. Yes.
So in other words, here's what happens then. Through perhaps DMV, motor vehicles, through perhaps even marriage. Once you enter into a contract, you're caught.
Yeah, because now you are under contract law, and you're not under natural law, but the courts are designed to be where I just found that what is the meaning of judicial proceedings and ecclesiastical law, which goes in not only in ecclesiastical law but every other law. And we just got these books, and it's astounding that no court can be called a court unless it operates under the foundation of natural law.
Oh, what's natural law? Are we talking about divine law, that which is imparted through the scriptures?
The law of nature, of which Lysander Spooner, you can get a good rendition of what he's talking about, and he does go in and mention natural law, which is the law of nature. And you can't deny the law of nature, and it says in these books that we're reading right now, and I'm not that well versed on it. I mean, I had this idea from way back when, but now we've got it in actual print. And there is another researcher in New York and me, and one other fellow that is delving into this now, and we're coming up with so much stuff that, it's mind-boggling.
Well, going back to state also before we leave this, because I've always wondered why some states call themselves commonwealths and others just call themselves states. Is there anything of any kind of impact that one state one geographical place calling itself a commonwealth is different from those who call themselves states?
No, it's just whatever terminology that they want to bring up. The old New York and New Jersey didn't call themselves commonwealths, but Pennsylvania and Virginia did.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always go riding through Virginia and see the Commonwealth of Virginia when you cross the state line from North Carolina.
Right.
Or Maryland going in, because you cross over the Mason-Dixon line, and it seems all the states down below the Mason-Dixon, generally, except for Pennsylvania, call themselves commonwealths.
Mm-hmm. All right, but there is really nothing telling.
No, there's no difference between a commonwealth and New Mexico calling itself a state.
Now,
State of because if you look at the word and the phrase, state of New Mexico, the little word of, that is a key to understanding everything, because that is, for the most part, in standard dictionary definitions, you won't find it in Black's or any law dictionary, means belonging to or emanating from, such as the old thing, are you of your mother and father? All right, that means that the mother and father, you belong to them, and you came from them. You were generated from them. Now, if you look at state of, and then it says, like, New Mexico, all right? New Mexico is a geographical area. But the state, or the estate, is higher. It's above the ground level. And that's what the people operate in as a fiction, above the ground level. Therefore, it's called state of. The state belonging to the landmass called New Mexico. Or Florida. You can put any state you want in there. It don't matter. And a lot of, in the statute law, they say that this state, or the state of, and it's all capitals. You never see a standard writing. It's all capital words. State of North Carolina. I had an argument with the Attorney General deputy in North Carolina at one point in time, and I nailed his hide to the wall when I says, well, how come you're talking about North Carolina as a geographical area in your letter to me, and yet your letterhead says all capitals, state of North Carolina? Now, which is it? He never come back to me. Never responded to that after that.
All right, and I would assume, all right, let me get this straight, you would rather deal with the geographical place known as North Carolina.
Yeah.
And you don't want to deal with state of North Carolina in caps.
Or this state, when they call it this state. Because that is the fiction, that they can only deal with other fictions. That's why they took the man out of his status of physical being and put him in the capacity of a person who is a fictional entity, existing only in the minds of man.
But does that also rope them into being employees?
Sure.
Of the state and or federal government?
That's right. And when you vote and register to vote, you now become a member, which is the body politic, and like so many drops of rain, you can't look at a pond and say, oh, that drop out there 300 feet at so-and-so dimensions is me. Well, no. You're taken as a whole body, and therefore that's why you're not sovereign, because you can't be sovereign in the artificial capacity where you have a representative.
All right, so what's the telling point then? If you adhere to a certain place from which promulgates a representative, you're cooked.
Yeah, right. And a lot of people say, oh, it's my Constitution. Wrong. They never created it. It was never ratified by any people of the United States, never ratified by any people of the states, when the states had their own Constitution. And you can go back into the original constitutions of each particular state, especially the 13, and you'll see that in the bottom of the footnotes, now you'd have to go to the Constitution annotated in the state, not just plain old Constitution. You'll never find it. You got to go to the Constitution annotated, and usually you can find that in the State Archive building that houses all the original documents. Okay, you might find it in a state library, in the biggest state library that you got, in the Capitol, which is where I found it. And it says this Constitution was never ratified by the people. It was never presented to the people. It was just done. So therefore, now they created a corporation. And going back to what Montgomery wrote, the reason why they had to create the corporation was because it was still under the control of the Crown, and the Treaty of Peace didn't give up the land or anything. It still retained the land, and it only gave the people their freedom, and that was it.
Treaty of Peace, you're referring to...
1783.
Yeah, the one that was drafted by King George?
Right. Yeah.
Well, we talked about this. Isn't it bizarre? If we win the war, how come they draft the terms?
Yeah, because if we won the war, the troops would not have been in here till 1812, and they all carried their guns. They didn't give up their weapons.
Nope.
Now, you look at MacArthur when we bombed Japan, senseless, and on the aircraft carrier, when he signed everything, Japan couldn't even have guns in their own country. There was no army. They couldn't have an army.
Oh, yeah, we understand. Exactly. The thing is, there were no spoils of war for the fledgling United States.
No.
It was business as usual.
Yep.
Give back to the Tories the stuff you stole from them.
Yep.
Yeah. And real quick, not to go on about it, there's a lot of views on why, and they may be all correct, why the War of 1812. What is your take on the reason why we had that thing?
Well, the reason why they had the war is they had to go in and destroy a lot of the documents in Washington. And once they did that, the original documents, especially like the 13th Amendment that you hear about.
Well, the old 13th Amendment.
Yeah, the old original 13th Amendment, which was in a lot of the state constitutions. I did some research all the way up to 1844, was in the books. After 1844, in any library I went into, I couldn't find it in any of the previous books, 1845, 1850, 1860. It didn't exist.
But as a refresher, we can tell folks who have not heard this that was an amendment that barred those carrying titles of nobility from holding office in the U.S., right?
Lawyers.
All right, lawyers being what? Esquires, I guess?
Yes.
What about exchequers as well, and also sirs?
Yeah, exchequers in them too. And, believe it or not, the word sir is a title of nobility.
Sir.
Mr. Yep.
Is that short for something? Like master or something like that?
Yeah. They'll even tell you in genealogy when you look at Mr. and all that, and it was under a squire. It was just under a squire, but higher, not as high as a gentleman. And remember, all those founding fathers referred to as gentlemen, weren't they?
All right, so that means that we being misters are hoi polloi.
Yeah.
Okay, we're rabble.
Yep.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When the colonies did decide or didn't decide to become amalgamated in this United States of America, was something lost when they lost the title colonies into state or commonwealth?
Yeah, because they were under Confederation, and the Confederation was so much better than what they did. And that's why they had to do that, to destroy the Confederation, creating this new convention where they were, colonies. And then what happened is their first constitutions of the originals were called colonies. They weren't called states.
No.
And then what happened was when the United States Constitution was drafted, in the second drafting of the state's second constitution, they were putting in the beginning a capital S for state. They had to amend it, and you can read it in every one of the constitutions. They used a small case state because they were under subjection of the United States.
All right. Couple things. One, going back to what you said about the banks and such. I've read a lot and I've heard a lot about. Let's face it. Washington has almost been deified.
Right.
George, right?
Sure.
Okay. I think we've been poisoned, as Don Henley said, by these fairy tales.
Yeah, there's a lot of myth out there that you cannot break people because they were brought up with it, they were taught it in school, they were taught by their mothers and fathers, and it was just a perpetual lie all the way back to 1700s.
Well,
and people just cannot grasp that this government, quote, I call it RICO anymore. When I refer to all my emails or anything, it's a RICO establishment. It is. If you read Title 18, 1961 through 1963 in their sections, you will see the exact thing that the government is creating these statutes for the so-called mafia corporations. They actually fit the definition to a T.
Mm-hmm. Well,
actually, when it says, oh, well, we got to have a Republican form of government, you got it. And the people don't realize it. It's a corporation. That's it.
All right. Well, there's a good point, too. Let me stop there because, and there's another thing I want to throw back in, but just because you've mentioned that, let's look at that. Because people will say, well, if the representative form of government is a trap as well, then what in the world are basically citizens to do? What do we call down? I mean, I think I know, but I'm going to ask you.
Well, you've got to break that, quote, citizen person status. And you see, an artificial can't have a status. Only a man can have a status. And if you read in the LaSalle book, in the person on ATG Press, under the Informer's article called Person, I mean, it's hard to explain it on the air. You've got to read it in print.
All right, let's do that right now. We've not talked about your website. I've got it up right now. We're looking at ATG, that's Alpha Thomas George, press.com. You go and you click on the section for the Informer.
Uh-huh.
All right, now, as we're looking around...
you just follow down until you see just the word person. There's one word.
Okay.
Down in, I think it's the government section.
Mm-hmm.
I forget where they put it.
That's all right.
And if you click on person and open it up, you'll see it's quite lengthy, but it's the exact quote out of the book.
Are we talking about excise taxes, person, and taxes?
Oh, there's everything in there.
Is that it?
No, it's just...
There's another one?
Just the word person. Just scroll down till you find the word person.
Oh, I would like to go into the heading scumbags, too, but that's for another time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, jeez. Okay. All right.
They are, but...
Oh, yeah, all right. I'm there.
Just hit person.
I got it. The Informer person. I'm there.
Uh-huh.
All righty.
Now, click on person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's DeWitt. One of the authors is DeWitt. And it's from the LaSalle. It's volume 2 or 3 from the LaSalle University. DeWitt is one of the authors, the professors of law.
Why, and people are going to want to know this, and I don't blame them. Yeah, it's by James DeWitt. Gotcha. You've named a number of institutions, and one that has always popped up, of course, in our conversation right now is LaSalle. Are some of these universities more legally astute than others as far as what they contain?
No, they're all about the same, but the ones that are more bold is like the Avalon Project.
Yes, very good. That's from Yale. Yep.
Yeah, and they tell you the truth, but they know that the American people they're not cognizant of the words and terms. That terms are used in law and words aren't.
Well, so let me ask you this. I have a friend that says, whenever I find things that are in print, well, why would the conspirators state that kind of thing? I'm saying because people aren't paying attention.
That's right.
Hence, with Avalon, they can tell you the real deal because they know most of America is asleep and won't go there.
That's right. And even if they do tell you the truth, well, it don't look like the truth because...
Right, in practice,
in practice, what I've been taught, let's go somewhere else and look.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what they're looking for.
All right.
If they understood the foundation of the whole fraud, I mean, people would pick up on this like, flies and stick on the fly paper. And then the RICO establishment would really be in hot water, and as I said, basically the only way is a violent, bloody revolution to start all over again. And, of course, maybe in another 200 years we'll be right back to the same thing. Because when people are put into power, that's it.
All right.
The power corrupts.
Well, you and I did not talk about this. I did a couple of shows based on what you had said. And we're going to talk about somebody else who you felt resonated with the way you felt, even though he's a Marxist, and that was Jerry Frisia, who wrote Toward an American Revolution. And we'll go there in a second. But
there's a lot of myths out there that you just can't break.
But you see, you and I once talked off mic, and as you were telling me what was going on, and you talked to me, you told me, like, Patrick Henry wasn't up for this, but he signed on.
Right.
And I don't know if you remember this or not. I said, well, why did he sign on? And you said, because he's a lawyer.
That's right.
So here's where I'm going with this. In fact, I was heading for biblical scripture, an online Bible.
Okay.
Where Jesus says about, 3 times he talks about the lawyers, and it's not good.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you said to me that
he was that's the only time
that
the Lord wished woe upon them, the lawyers and the scribes and the Pharisees.
He put them all in the same group, that's right.
Put them all in the same group. And just think about this. That's the only group that the Lord ever wished woe upon. And if the Lord gets that incensed against the lawyers, well, doesn't that tell you something?
Well, it does, and I don't want to split hairs, and I'm keystroking here as we talk. But what is said about them and what they withheld from the people. I mean, I could buy a little time and play some Jeopardy music here.
Oh yeah. Well, they give the old thing is they hold the keys to the kingdom and they don't use them.
Well, here I got one. If you're okay with this. All right, hold on.
It's hard when you're trying to find something you know.
Well, I mean, obviously I don't want people to hang in there and wait for me to do this stuff. Okay, let me just say this. In Luke 11:46, he said, and he said, meaning Christ, woe unto you also, ye lawyers, for ye laid men with burdens grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burdens with one of your fingers.
Right.
Do you want to give us a little breakdown on that?
You mean what he was saying?
Well, why do the lawyers lay men or burden them with those grievous things, and yet they were never involved in it? In other words, am I looking at the fact that they allowed conflicts to arise?
Yes.
And sought no mediation until they created an occupation that could come in and say, okay, we can mediate this.
Yeah, because that's what's called barrity. B-A-R-R-A-R-T-Y. And if you look at that, that means that they lay in wait, create a situation so that they can make money off of it.
I would say, it seems to me, that this is put up right up there with bankers.
Yeah.
For creating things.
That's right.
All right, another time, I guess it's Luke 11:52, he said, woe unto you, lawyers, for, now this is interesting, for ye, or you, have taken away the key of knowledge.
That's right.
You entered not in yourselves, and them that were entering in you hindered. All right, go ahead.
That means that the lawyers are creating their own terms, their own definitions for words that the average man doesn't understand and thinks it means a standard street language.
Which it is not.
Which it is not, no.
All right, so when it says, woe unto you, lawyers, for you have taken away the key of knowledge by creating your own.
Right.
You entered not in yourselves, well, it was your ball game, and then that were entering in, you hindered. In other words, they can't get through all this crap unless they're with you.
Yeah, because when you go to court today, you sit there and you argue, and man, this has got to win, and then you say, how'd I lose? But
doesn't this also come into play, with the fact that you look at any kind of contract, it's like, who wrote this?
That's right.
Who wrote this crap? Everybody dies and gives up before they get to the end of it.
Yeah.
They obfuscate, and they know they bog you down in the obfuscation, and if you don't read, not even the fine print, but all the print, you're a dead duck.
That's right. Sure, because let's take Schultz, for instance. His term is we the people, right? And he capitalizes people. So they're more, when they go before the court, the court looks at him and says, well, they know that they're the people. They know that they're the abject slaves, that they mean nothing.
So what's his problem?
So, yeah. So, being that he's a member of the body politic, and so is all their groups, well, wait a minute, you've got to pay the tax. You're obligated to pay the tax because you're a member of the political society. You're the artificial entity, and you can't claim natural law rights or God-given rights, which is natural law.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're not dealing in natural law.
But I mean...
We're not a court. Well, we're a court, but we're a contract court, and you contracted into our realm, therefore you have to abide by it. And if you look at it, it's similar to a corporation like IBM. And if you become an employee, you're a member of IBM, but now you can go further and buy stock and then be a corporate stockholder. And therefore you have some say to the representative who speaks strictly for the company. Just put the United States in here, or a state. And therefore his only duty of obligation is to make sure the corporation exists and makes money for the stockholders so they can get dividends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the United States. Same thing with North Carolina. Same thing with Florida or any of the states. They are corporations, and therefore they must have the representatives to see that they can operate supposedly in the black, but they're always in the red. And only what the people vote on, they can take it and leave it, because a lot of times when I used to be with a corporation and they would send me, your proxy letter, and if you don't sign the letter and vote how you want, it is assumed that it will be in the interest of the corporation and the representative will vote as such.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with the United States with Congress. They are only to look out for the corporation called the United States. They're not to look out for the people belonging to the corporation, because the people can't sue the corporation itself, because it's then suing itself.
Right, and they can't do that. Well, would you mind going back just for a second?
Yeah.
Though you went on it, you spoke to it to a great extent during the hours that we've done past shows. But just as a thumbnail, which I know it's hard to do because people always ask questions, but that's fine. They can go back and they can contact you and by the way, also, I mean, let's talk about this. It's interesting because once you told me that when you gave all the information for free, everybody shunned it. If you put a price on it and put it up in the book, they want it.
Yeah, right.
Well, somebody else said the same thing, honestly, and I had to laugh because I'm going, yeah, I've heard that before. But on the website, there are resources there. And you also have books, which I just purchased also, that explain things. And listen, I mean, don't be shy about this. The one thing I've told people also, and let this be known, you never sought me out. I sought you out, and you are not somebody who wants to be a public figure. I understand it. You were good enough to come on. I appreciate that. So you wanting a certain amount of distance from, the strum and drang of everything is understandable. But please,
I like to go out and like a lot of people charge X amount of dollars. Or when I used to go back in the 90s on seminars, and I'd fly all over. I says, hey, pay my airfare out there and my food and my lodging. And that's about all I got.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get like $250 a person,
Right, somebody else did.
Yeah.
All right, but please, now, talk about the website. I mean, don't be shy. Talk about the books that are there.
Those people that came to me and asked me if I would like to be on their website, I says, well, I was hesitant. And they says, well, you can put whatever you want on there, and you got some good writings that I've seen, and why don't you just make the writings and put it there? And after all, they stole all your books and everything, and when you first did it, and I said, yeah, I said, so maybe I'll think about it. So then I about 6 months later, I called them up, and I said, yeah, I'll put it on there. And here's some of my writings that I haven't published, or I haven't even thought about writing a book on it. So here's what I've got, and that's how they started it.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the books that I did have, like The New History of America and Which One Are You? The Which One Are You was the first one that I started with, and I understand that it's still the standard for the old people and some of the new people that picked up on it, back in as late as, 96, 97. And after that, it was so well dispersed by pirating and everything else like that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bunch of lawyers out in California that tried to break the book and, argue different points within it, and they couldn't. And so then, I guess, about 3 or 4 pretty well-known people, some of them are dead already, they took it and changed it a little bit and made it as if it was their books. And, oh well, what are you going to do, So, anyway...
But you are on... I mean, let me ask you this. I don't know, and I'm not going to ask who ATG Press is, but they seem to have done right by you.
Well, that's against the grain.
Right.
That's what the ATG needs. And the people... There was another person... I'll say person had it, and then they took it over, so to speak. They weren't too familiar with setting up websites and everything, so they had a lot of heartaches with it until they got someone who was originally with it, and then they worked it out and got it all set up to where it's at now.
Well, you're happy with the present situation, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it looks good. I mean, it's very ordered. There's not a problem.
And so, I just had sold so few of the Which One Are You that when they ran out, I just didn't bother because I didn't have any more money to buy another 1,000 books.
Mm-hmm.
So I made an arrangement where the printer, the publisher, said, look, I know the situation, and the cost is going to be much higher to run 1,000 books now than what it was in 1990, and you're still charging the same price. He says, so you ain't going to make anything, so let's do it this way. And I says, oh, well, let's see what he says. He says, why don't you let me, when you get an order for a book, I'll print it, but I won't print it ahead of time. Only when you get the
order. When you get an order, right.
I will print it. So I says, hey, that sounds good with me. He says, so you get the money for the book, have him send you the money. He says, and you come down to me, and I'll print it up, and then you pay me for the book, for my printing costs.
Okay.
And I says, oh, that's fine.
All right, so it's an equitable situation.
It was a good, equitable deal.
All right. And so, folks, please, by all means, go to the site. Go to ATGpress.com, and of course, as I always have, and as you well know now, because this show's going up, you know that site, that link rather, will be underneath Ironman's show. And so, by all means, click it, get yourself familiarized with what's going on. If you have any problems, there's the information. If you don't mind, to go back, and this is the one that's going to, it's a big kicker, and you well know it, and that is using semantics to play games with the United States of America and America. Is that correct?
Right.
Would you give us that dichotomy?
Well, you can't find America in any of the dictionaries, and when you do find it, and you can find it way, way in the back, 1800s and back there, and then also the writings where they had America, and even on the maps they had America where, quote, the United States is now. If you look at that phrase, again, United States of, belonging to, America. Right there, America. And I've lately gone into some old books and writings where they talk about America, not talking about America as a definition, but in their story about America and the people coming here and what they said while we're going to America. And so on and so forth. But the term United States is a place. It's a corporation, but it belongs to America. It doesn't belong to France or China or Germany. Otherwise, it'd be United States of China, United States
Sure.
of Russia.
But then who's America?
That's right. So America was the boundary between Canada and Mexico. And only over to as far as the Ohio River. That was it, the Mississippi. Because all the states, we went to the archives and got the states, like North Carolina, was from the ocean all the way through to the Mississippi River, where Tennessee is now, and then they chopped it off and made Tennessee the tail portion of North Carolina. And South Carolina went all the way over to the Mississippi.
All right, now there's nothing nefarious necessarily in that. It just shows that when they talked about America back then,
Right.
it was the idea of we have created this estate, and it goes as far as we have dominion.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because it didn't take in all of Texas, because Texas was part of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And Canada was actually part of the British Empire. And
Oh, things have changed?
yeah, then they changed it from down through the St. Lawrence River and broke it off, and that was still mainly under English rule was Canada. But down here in the lower states, below Alberta and Saskatchewan and all that, which was the upper states when they referred to it, that was America. And it was because, remember, there's no United States yet. There's only the colonies. That's why they call it America.
So America, though, I mean, even though we have North America, South America,
Right.
and we get hit on, especially U.S. citizens, about being, I guess, somewhat provincial, I guess, for referring to us alone as America.
Right.
Are you stating that, in essence, going back at least, not to the first peoples, but at least to when we were consolidated under 13 states, to refer to America as what is now the United States would have been proper?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I have the encyclopedia. This is a book used in schools. Encyclopedia of American History. Doesn't say Encyclopedia of the United States History, does it?
No.
And it was Harper and Row, Richard B. Morris, revised edition. And it goes to the Encyclopedia of American History. And you get a lot of these. It's edited by Richard Morris, the Governor Morris Professor of History in Columbia University. And it goes, original peopling of the Americas. And then it's pre-Columbian exploration, the founding of the English colonies, the settlement of New England, the middle colonies, the settlement of Florida, the Carolinas, and Georgia. And they didn't call Carolinas, they call Carolina, L-A-N-A, not L-I-N-A-S, as it is now.
Okay.
And then they go in, the colonies and the empire, Anglo-French, the area of American Revolution, didn't say United States Revolution, did it? The early national and antebellum periods, the War of 1812, the War of Mexico, the Civil War and the Reconstruction Acts, and domestic issues from Hayes to Wilson, the United States in world affairs, the Spanish-American, the United States in World War I, domestic issues, goes all the way up to presidents and their cabinets, and the United States. This book was up to 1945, and that was it. Then it goes into tropical chronology and federal land and legislation and policy since 1789, population and immigration, the Constitution of the Supreme Court, the American economy, public finance, science. And it's got 400 notable Americans in the biblical. It's got maps and charts of everything in here.
And what book is that in?
This is the Encyclopedia of American History, Richard B. Morris, by Harper and Row. And let me see if it's got a... this book tells you everything.
Is this a volume set, or is it a one-book thing?
No, it's one book.
Okay.
And it's published for, Encyclopedia. It is copyright 1963, 1961. And the Library of Congress card number is 61-10213.
Okay. Now, If I can...
It really goes everything back and forth, and gives you when the first bank come in, and actually the real bank of the United States and the states came in 1841, and how that was destroyed by the Whigs, and then reinstituted in 1846, and all the way up to its demise when the Federal Reserve took over and become the fiscal agent, and then when it was abolished in 1921. I mean, it gives every detail.
What was abolished in 1921?
The Independent Treasury Act, which was the real banks for the United States that dealt in specie, and they always had to have hard cash, hard money,
gold and silver.
Gold and silver.
Okay, so they abrogated that, and that's right.
Then took the Treasury Department and the Treasury, the real U.S. Treasury at the time, and abolished it, and all the Treasury officials then went to a newly created office called GAO.
Oh, jeez, okay.
Right? And then the Federal Reserve took over as a fiscal agent in 1921 because of the Act of 1920. That's the name of the Act, 1920. That's when they abolished the real United States Treasury and gave it up and had a Department of Treasury. Now, this is what people don't understand. There's a Department of Treasury. It is not the United States Treasury. It doesn't exist any longer since 1921.
All right, so you're saying that the U.S. Department of the Treasury was gone after 1921.
Right, it's only a department.
And now it's a department.
That's all.
And so what's the telling thing about its break from calling it the United States?
Well, it's a Treasury, and the governor of the International Monetary Fund is the top officer.
The IMF rules it.
Yeah, the IMF rules it. Yes.
So
the collection agents are the IRS. Yeah.
So in other words, the IMF.
The IMF is actually a child of. I thought it was the United Nations, but it wasn't. It was actually from the Federal Reserve, going back to the 1916 Federal Reserve Act.
But what does the Federal Reserve serve also? In other words, does this somehow, some way?
Oh, well, the Federal Reserve is the fiscal agent for the United States Congress. Actually, the United States, when you look at the word United States, it's AKA, Congress assembled. That's the only time the United States exists, when Congress is assembled.
All right, I don't want to go too far afield because I'm going to confuse people who have never heard this before. But two things. One, the fact that they created the United States means it only refers to what? Those who are involved in the government and the district.
Right, and those who want to join and take their status out of the man situation to a person situation, becoming members of the body politic who are subject to all the taxes needed to operate the corporation.
But the Constitution, therefore, also.
Yeah, that is a corporate charter.
And that only protects whom?
It only protects those people in government.
Those criminals who reside, or at least do business in the District of Columbia.
Yeah, all those RICO people.
Okay. And then, of course, I told you this, and it was borne out, because you had mentioned this, and not long after, you talked about the Bill of Rights are not for us. We get privileges. Right. Those in D.C.
Privileges and immunities is all that the person gets. He doesn't get rights.
So that when
he gave up those rights when he left the man status, because when he left the man status, he left the Lord's household and cleaved to another master, of which he owed allegiance to.
Right.
Because he gave up allegiance to the Lord. Because when you pledge allegiance, that's what it is. Look up the word allegiance in the Black's Fourth Dictionary, and it means you're a serf.
Well, let me say this. A lot of Christians will be upset about that, but let's clear this up. When you know it, it's another thing. And you know I'm hooked into it, no doubt about it, but I understand now what the deal is. And I would say, yeah, okay, my servitude, my servility is to them,
right.
but they can't take me in a sense.
Right.
My point would be then, would you agree, as I've said on the show also, that when people eschewed divine law, when they eschewed grace under Jesus Christ, human government, as said in Luke 4, when Satan says, "These are my kingdoms."
Right.
Am I correct in stating that if you don't go that way, that is to divine law and such, then you're going to be basically in servitude to Satan and his creation?
Sure.
Now, can I also say this? That Jesus knew it. And he said, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's." What I'm looking at is this: he knew that we would come up and be under this burden, but he understood, like, look, take care of them, give them what they want. In a sense, I mean,
right, because
there's another kingdom waiting for you. So in other words, I'd like to fight against the IRS and all that. And I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean those who can resist and succeed, fine. But if you don't, he still knows that that's what the deal is.
Oh, yeah, because like Montgomery used to tell me, he says, you can't change his word. You can't change history. You can't change the future because he knows what the future is and he's already laid it out.
And I just think he was saying, when he made that comment, give it to him. I'm there, I provide for you, just give it to him. Your kingdom is not of this earth.
Right.
And so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say, what's going on up now in New Hampshire. This is a tacky thing. Or nettlesome thing. Brown and his wife are going against the government.
Right.
Now, do you want to comment about that since I opened it up? I'll leave it to you if you want to say something.
I haven't seen a lot. I saw it on the internet a lot, but I really didn't. I've been away like 3 weeks. I just come back from a trip, and it was at that point when it was coming out about Brown and everything, and I haven't read what his paperwork was. I imagine that he, being like everybody else, the average American, there's a lot in there that he killed himself with.
I'm assuming.
Because I read some paperwork that a fella put out. His name was Calab or something like that. And he asked me about it because I made a comment, and he just CC'd him to other people and other researchers, and I says, man, this guy, everything looks, the affidavit and everything looks good, and termination of his license and all that. I says, but he killed himself because he's saying he's part of the body politic. He's saying one thing on one hand and the opposite on the other hand, and these guys that are in the court, they know what's going on. They're sitting back there and saying, another dummy.
All right, so in other words, he actually roped himself back in.
Yeah, he did good up to the point, and all of a sudden he's coming back in claiming citizenship and my Constitution and my rights and yada, 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 the same old patriot crap that you hear all the time because they don't know any better.
Well,
they weren't taught that in school. They weren't taught to think. I mean, this guy might be an older guy, but at least the guys 60 and up had enough we had enough education to think for yourselves. We weren't taught, well, shut up and just do as I say because I'm telling you this, and I don't want no argument. And the kids don't argue with the teachers today.
All right, I mean, I'm going to
argue with the teachers. No, that ain't right.
Well, I mean, I'm saying this, not you, but after we spoke for some time, and I read certain things and blah blah blah. What I came down to the fact was the whole thing has been a fiction.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
it's one of the biggest myths ever perpetrated on a large mass of people.
Well, and again, off mic, you and I spoke, and I mean, you were listening to me as I was kind of like awakening, and I said, so in other words, those of us who consider us patriots, blah blah blah, want to take back something we never had in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm okay with that. And I'm over it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But you realize, and I'm saying this is not you. Give me the email, not yourself.
Right.
And that is, what you see now, I think, are show hosts who are making money over propagating the idea that we, one, can beat this, which we can't, and two, we can take back which we never really had.
Right.
It's a halcyon thing to think about. Everybody harkens back to the days of Washington, but I'm saying, hold on, take a look, folks. You know that the history was sanitized and screwed with. Why do you hang on to the Santa Claus idea of Washington?
That's right.
And it's okay. I'm all right with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been elites, and the rest of us. I mean, I always think back to Monty Python and said, how can you tell he's a peasant? Well, he's got shit on him.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's clear, guys. I mean, it's the same thing from the monarchies of Europe, and don't be upset. I mean, they just brought it over here.
Yeah, that's all they did. And, until people admit to themselves and really understand it, nothing's ever going to change. I just got some email over of what they were doing in different states, and some of the recent rulings that just came down. And one of the fellows, the researchers, and what I was telling you about in New York, he says, I don't know when it's going to happen, but people are going to get fed up when this stuff happens. And he sent me a whole list of everything across the country that was going on. One woman is, she only owns half her house, and now she's...
Yeah, I heard about that.
Did you see that?
Yes. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Jeez. I hope it's a 2-bathroom edifice.
Yeah, at least 2 bathrooms or a bed and a half.
That'll be fun.
And about seizing the cars in California, and how not to commit yourself to Title 18, 1001, lying to the government, and how they, are doing that, and they're doing away with the silence now. You can't come up and say, I remain silent.
All right.
That just came through a recent court decision, I guess in the past week. And I don't have it here. I think if I still kept it, I think I do. I'll email it to you.
I appreciate that, but again, and I'm just going to, you're staying over, and I appreciate that as far as the hour goes. But two things. One, so in other words, let's face it, our founding fathers realized in the convention that when they dissed the Articles of Confederation,
right,
they knew what they were creating was still a very elitist document called the Constitution that kept them very much safe.
Yeah, because that's what happened is the king said, well, if you don't do this, I'll run a blockade against America, and I'll seize all your property over here in Europe, and you won't have nothing.
Then what was the Crown's advantage, though, in doing that?
Because the king actually couldn't give the land and the freedoms and everything that they were claiming that they got, because the heirs, the office found, was still here. He still had the heirs, and it was under the old natural law of passing down to the family members the property. He couldn't give away the property. It was in trust.
So you're saying by what took place and what he threatened would happen if it didn't, let's face it, Britain especially, but the monarchies of Europe still had their tentacles into this newfound land.
Oh, definitely. Most definitely, yes.
All right.
And if you go into looking at the history of the Great American Fortunes, you'll see how everything was run. It's by Gustavus Myers. And I found that some of the fellows said that you can get it online.
Wow. Okay.
And it's a 700-page book.
All right. What are the search terms under which somebody could find that? It's called the what?
The History of the Great American Fortunes.
By Gustavus?
Yeah, Gustavus Myers.
And would that be M.Y.?
Yeah, it's a New York Modern Library in New York.
Or is it M-Y-E-R-S or is it M-E-I-E-R-S?
M-Y-E-R-S.
Okay, good. Well, I'll be looking for that.
Library edition was 1936, published by Random House.
Do you find, I-Man, that there are works that told us exactly what's shaken, and of course, because they have not, if they've not been suppressed, they've not been promoted, and you can find them in libraries, but you got to go looking for them because they don't jump out and tell you, "Here I am."
Yeah, that's why I keep telling, I used to tell people, I said, don't take my word for it. When I made my first book, Which One Are You? I said, look, don't take my word for it. Go and search it for yourself. This is what a lot of lawyers did in California when they tried to, knock the book. Not one of them has ever knocked the book yet, as far as the truth and what is there. I mean, it's self-evident. It's right from the government's own documents that they can't rebut.
I'm going to get a little out there, but I think you'll understand it and you can address it as you wish, and of course you will. And that is what I've looked at is that with all the literature that's been out there, even down to, I guess, the 16th century, maybe the 17th century, not going back all that far, this landmass was known about. I think it was coveted. I think that whatever enterprises and people came here wanted it to be a certain thing. I think that Bacon was probably right in referring to it as I think it was thought of in the Old World as the New Atlantis.
Right.
I think, and as you well know, even in the Garden of Eden, when Satan was cast down here, you'll find Satan and you'll find God. And no matter where you go, there will always be the yin and yang. Right. My point is, when they came to the New World, as much as it was promoted, and perhaps to a certain degree, correctly so, as an escape, a haven, etc., etc., you don't go anywhere where you don't deal with the serpent.
Right.
And I think that we have been hoodwinked into believing that we were God-breathed, that God shed His grace on me, because I'm saying that, Jehovah doesn't care about nations, He cares about people.
Right.
All right. So therefore where I'm going with this is that this nation, how in the world, and I've said this on the air before, I want you to respond to it if you wouldn't mind, how in the world do you create this district of ISIS, loaded with occult symbolism, and every capital city with their domes and their obelisks? How do you do that and turn around and say, God shed His grace on thee? Your take on that rather expansive broadside.
Well, that's, I would say that anybody that believes in that is living in La La Land.
And believes in what? That we were God-breathed?
That
God shed His grace on thee?
On the country.
Yes.
You don't shed the grace on the country. He sheds the grace on the people.
That's right, the hearts. That's right.
Yeah. Because a country is nothing. It's an abstract, inanimate object. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't have a soul.
No. And we're not bound by the Old Testament law, which understood boundaries and such. We understand that's it. I've seen that pulled out a lot about illegal immigration. We don't need that. My feeling is that was then. Get off the law. You're under grace.
Right.
And that changes things. All right. If you agree with that, then again, we look at what took place. And let me ask you this. Our founding fathers, I don't know how many were Christian. Like I said, you looked at that work toward American Revolution, and it resonated with a lot of the stuff that you and Montgomery had come upon.
Right.
The guy's a Marxist, okay, fine. That's not the answer either. But at least he called it what it was.
Right.
Again, this nation was really not founded by what you would call Christian people. It was elites versus...
That's right. And in fact, when you read this book on history of the Great American Fortunes, that only started with Vanderbilt and those people back...
Morgan, yeah, Rockefeller, yeah.
Right. Even before Rockefeller was even born. But it didn't go back far enough. It didn't go back to Washington, Jefferson, Monroe, Adams. It didn't go back to those people and saw their fortunes because Washington was a land tycoon over here in 1653. And he made all of his money selling land.
What year was that again?
1653.
1653, Washington?
Yeah. I'm sorry, 17.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when he was out there surveying, we know what he was... when he was out surveying, we know what he was surveying for.
Oh, yeah.
His own interests.
It was a Virginia Land Company is the company he worked for. And that's when he made his millions. selling real estate to other landed people that had money.
So
the Biltmore Estates here in North Carolina and the Great Smokies was owned by one man, Rockefeller. Millions of acres. And he, quote, donated it to North Carolina.
quote, yeah, okay.
Great Smoky Mountains, you know. I mean, for these people to now Washington was selling to these people, and Washington was making a lot of money. George Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these people, Witherspoon and all them, it wasn't the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence. It was the people that, well, some of them were rich. Most of them weren't. But what it was the Founding Fathers were over here. They were part and parcel of the colony of England, and they didn't like what was going on in the taxes without representation, because they had no representation in England. And then when I got the Forest book out of Wake Forest, the professor there that wrote about it, he put even in excerpts, which I had put in the New History, where the Englishman said, basically, this country is a mirror image of England, and nothing has changed. And then one of the guys come over on the golf tournament and asked, how do you like your representation now with your taxation?
Yeah, because, I mean, as soon as we became, this federated nation, which I think was an experiment at World Federation, I think we are
right.
The first run of a New World Order.
Yeah, because that's what it was, because actually people had to go back and read the entire Confederation itself, the history, the Constitution, whatever you want to call it. But the Articles of Confederation, when you read that, I mean, that was, you can see why they offshoot and made the contract called the United States Constitution that made it a corporation under the realm of the Crown without being called to the realm of the Crown.
Right.
Just like Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company, let me see. No, not Ford. Let me take GM. Chevrolet Motor Division. And let's say they went off and there's Buick and Oldsmobile and Cadillac, the 5 divisions. Well, it's the same like 5 states.
Right.
And the United States, which would be GM itself, GM still controls Chevrolet division, no matter what the promotion is and the scheme of everything, GM still controls it. Well, it was the same thing as here. It was a confederation of colonies still controlled by the Crown, by England. The bankers, basically, not the Crown King, but he's the front man that did all the work. And it's like the mafia, you create a corporation, then you go 4 or 5 more corporations, you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper until you can't figure out who owns the corporation.
Well, and
like today's judges, almost every one of the judges has stock in prison industries.
Unicor? Okay.
Yeah, Unicor and all them. But when I was with some prisoners, and I found out about a lot of the things and the unions and stuff like that these judges, you won't find them in a corporation of Unicor. But you have to go, who owns Unicor? Now, who owns that company?
Mm-hmm.
And you have 5 and 6 deep companies until you finally get who are the stockholders getting benefits from Unicor or Prison Industries Incorporated. And why do you think the judges are so quick to put people in jail, and why is it that the legislature is made up mostly of lawyers create a felony where a felony really
doesn't exist
under natural law?
That's right. It's the old story about when people don't break enough laws, they'll make more things illegal.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's happening.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Let me. And this, I promise, this is the last question.
Okay.
And that is, when they decided the founding fathers, the framers, or whatever. I think I like the word framers better for the obvious reason. It's a frame.
I call them founding farters.
Okay. They must have known what they were doing.
Oh, they did, yes.
But I mean, was there a percentage, like you told me about Henry, who said, yeah, okay. I mean, in other words, they caved. They all caved. But how many do you believe, percentage-wise? I mean, it's a tough thing to say.
Yeah.
Understood that they were just relegating the American people to the same old thing, though, titled differently than their forefathers and their former generations had suffered under monarchical rule. So, can you get a fathom as to how some of them felt?
Not very many. Well, all the founding fathers knew, and all the anti-federalists knew. Outside of that, very few people knew.
But I mean, Patrick Henry was right in the middle of that, and he gave in.
I'd say 75 people knew, at least.
Okay.
From what I have read and what I have studied, and reading their excerpts from, like the Agrippa papers, the Pennsylvania papers, the Farmer, and all those in the Anti-Federalist group, like even the Farmer said, when the Pennsylvania delegates found out about the convention, it was a week late.
Yeah, right. Well, that's
intended. The convention already took place,
right.
And they were up in arms that they couldn't go because they would all vote against it.
So it was a rigged deal right from the beginning?
Right from the beginning.
Okay. And should we, as Americans, as U.S. citizens, should we be all upset? No, it's just the way that things go. It's the way of the world, is it not?
It's the way of the world. In other words, take a look at what's happening today, and then fast forward 200 years from now, and those people will look at Bush as a tyrant.
Yeah.
And then everything that's happened from now until 200 years from now, the people are just going to slide along like the people of 1776 did.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to get a lot worse, and I do remember the ending lines from a book by H.G. Wells. I think it was The Open Conspiracy, when he said that someday, somehow, in the distant future, of course, from when he wrote that, and which is still beyond us, he said that somebody will pick up a paper and look at what was going on, which we would, which we definitely love, and they'll say there was such a world.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
That's what we're in today.
Yes.
And you cannot. Now, let me give you a real short reasoning here. On my trip into another state, my relative, we were sitting. They took us out to dinner, and we're sitting around in a restaurant, and something came up about terrorism and something like that, and she said, and I didn't argue with her, and neither did my wife, and she said, well, if we had more laws, 9/11 wouldn't have happened, and we wouldn't all have to be afraid.
Right.
In other words, give up all your freedoms, and what do you got? You still have nothing, because the main terrorism
is by the government
in this country is the government itself.
And I'm in.
All the laws they're writing is against the people here, not foreigners. It's under the guise of protecting the people from foreigners, but hey, look at what it is now. In fact, Lindsay, the South Carolina
Senator?
Representative, just came out and said that there's so many illegals having so many fake Social Security numbers and cards that even the Social Security can't guarantee that what they have on their records is true. Even yours or mine.
Sure. Well, I would remind you of this, and I'll send you this in an email because I've transcribed it because, for obvious reasons, you'll understand it when I just paraphrase it.
Okay.
Do you remember the movie A Man for All Seasons? Paul Scofield playing Sir Thomas More?
No, honestly, I don't.
1967, and King Henry VIII can't make more bow to his wishes, and he gives him. He basically runs a bluff give in or get decapitated, and Moore calls his bluff, and Moore loses his head. But there was an exchange in that, and I will send you the exchange between him and his son-in-law. I don't know if this is ringing a bell at all, but Will Roper is a lawyer, and his son-in-law a firebrand.
Oh, okay.
And Roper says to Moore, he said, because they know there's a snitch in their midst, and they know it, Lord Richie Rich or whatever, and he says to him, why don't we throw him in jail? And Moore says, for what? He's not committed any crime. And they go into this thing, and then finally Moore, whether this really happened or not, but it was an exceptionally brilliant moment, I think, in cinema. And Moore says, and what would you do? Would you cut down all the laws to get after him? And Roper says, yes, I would. And then Moore says to him, and when the devil turned round on you and came after you, the laws being all laid flat, where would you hide?
Yeah.
All right, I don't need to explain it any further.
Right, yeah.
Right, and that's what we're facing right now, are we not?
Yeah.
And people don't realize it. You know, there are laws for your protection, and when you lay them all flat, the boogeyman has nothing at all now to stop them from coming after you.
Right.
Listen, it's always great to talk to you. I don't take it, very lightly when you do come on. I'm glad you came on on a shorter notice. But as July 4th hit me right between the eyes on our celebration of the Day of Dependence, I couldn't help but want you to come back. I appreciate that you did. I hope you didn't mind chewing the fat with us.
Oh, no. In fact, I even forgot about the 4th of July because when he says, he says, I think we have the 4th of July this weekend. And I says, I don't know. I forgot about it.
Okay.
That's how much, I don't even worry about it anymore.
Well, listen, I hope you don't mind coming on. I think you don't because you do. But like I said, I never take it for granted, and I do appreciate it. And I'm probably going to bug you in the future for as long as time as we have.
All right.
All right, listen, thanks very much. Do have a safe week. Do have a safe holiday. And we'll talk on the other side.
I know Kung Fu. Show me.